I don't know if he knows he's muted.
Are you muted?
Here.
I'm stunned. So let me get my emotions under control here. Bear with me. So in one way or another, I've been engaged in trying to transform education for 35 years. Oof. That's the most stunning presentation I've ever seen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That means
Thank
a lot.
you.
I took a lot of notes. I'll get to those. Holy shit.
Oh, I love it. And
All right.
John, you see where the school was.
So I'm going to get there. Of course I did. I've done a lot of work in the Naval Yards over the last 15 years. I know it well. But I don't want to come at this with all the pieces. At the core of what you guys just presented is what everybody needs to see, hear, and in fact, understand. I have nothing to offer you guys. You understand it way better than I do. Simply stated, that is the most staggeringly transformational video about education I think I've ever seen. Wow. Wow. So let's come at it. I want to come at it at different levels. First of all, if you believe that there are energies operating in the world that we don't understand, and I state that, simply stating that we didn't even understand as humans that electricity existed until like late 18th century. We didn't really even begin to understand gravity until 17th century. The energy behind and invested and manifest in what you guys just presented is so powerful. I cannot imagine anyone seeing that and not being stunned by its effectiveness. And I can go through my notes here and like point by point, identify its power. So I have questions. But before I get to the questions, I just want to point out to you guys the brilliance of what you guys just did. If you don't already understand it, but I think you understand it better than I do.
I will speak quickly for the group that we have loved this project. I mean, it's been a process, but we have come to really love this project, and we have talked multiple times about the excitement behind it and how we wish we could, you know, how do we take this forward? How do we actually do this? Like, how do we break off and become our own, you know, like, how do we make this happen? You know, we've loved it.
That's exactly where I want to go with this. All right. So the power of what you just did, let me just go through the notes that I wrote down here. the identification that what we are struggling with is the industrialization of education. You guys immediately shifted that into being place sourced by grounding it in the naval yards. You immediately went into impacts on communities, and that schools are not just some ancillary process. They are core to the value and, in fact, regeneration of communities. It's core to that evolutionary process. You focused immediately on the uniqueness of each person. You talked about standards not being about specific content. You talked about a whole familial system with a head coach as opposed to just the child, because the child is embedded in a system of a family, which is embedded in a system of a community. These nested systems that must be addressed in an effective way if we're going to make any sort of transformational shift. You focused at the core. What I talked about in the last group was, what was it? You were so clear about the core of what you were trying to do, which is all about passion and purpose and service and real community contribution. And that I would take what you guys said, and that video, I would give it a title. I have a voice, and all voices matter. If I could give a title to what you guys said, what you guys are focusing on is an educational system that is based on I have a voice and all voices matter. I can make a difference. The whole idea that this is not abstract, which you made so clear in the video. We saw examples of students who were engaged in art, engaged in culinary stuff, engaged in, I can't even go through the whole list. It was brilliant. Guys, it was just, like, I want to use expletives that I can't use. It was just brilliant. All right. So the question I have for you is exactly the question that Kendall posed. How can we manifest this? The message is so clear and so spot on and so necessary and so transformational. The question is, since you guys were so brilliant in the creation of this masterpiece, it now becomes a question of how does this become manifest in a way that connects deeply to what the viewers of that video actually care about. And I think that it has something to do with connecting with the decision makers that can understand that education is exactly what you guys, I mean, it is the single clearest I've ever seen presentation on what education is supposed to be. I mean, it made me cry. It's like, this is what I've been looking for decades. So what's next, guys? Talk to me. What are you going to do? That's the only question I have, is what are you going to do? How do you
can find us a space at the Navy Yard, one.
So actually, I do have a question before I get to that. So the leadership collaboratory, it doesn't exist, right? So that whole video was as if it had existed, and these were interviews with people who have engaged in it, right?
Yeah, it's like an advertisement for our school.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter that it doesn't exist because you guys made it exist.
Right.
That is the manifestation of potential in ways I've never seen, ever. So what do you do? Guys, I have nothing to say other than a question. Make this happen. How are you going to do it?
First of all, we appreciate your kind words. I know we were on pins and needles. We were excited, but we wondered, were we stepping in places that we shouldn't? And then we tried to contain our excitement because we too wanted to manifest this into reality. And we danced around that question. What do we do next?
Yeah, so I suspect that there's something in there about another tagline to this. It was a direct quote that I heard, a contributory democracy.
Participatory.
I thought I heard contributory. It was participatory.
Mhm.
So maybe maybe my own projection threw in the word contributory, because what I saw was an educational system, or at least belief, that is about manifesting the contribution that each of us is being asked to bring into the world through allowing and giving each child, human, teacher, community, the power of having a voice that they actually value and care about. So a participatory, contributory democracy. So back to the energy guys of this, to me, regeneration is all about reading energies and manifesting energies. And that's really the question. How can you guys now take this into, and I'm trying to find a new word for concrete, because I just don't think that's a great word, because it has all kinds of weird anti-sustainability associations. How can we make this real? So what you guys did was make it real. By imaging, the power of this video is it imaged a reality that is a whole new potential than what we're experiencing now. So what do you do next? And that's all I want to ask. What do you do next? What's next? Make this happen. How are you going to do it?
It's tough because I feel like we've spent so many hours, talking about it, and when it's come together, we always said, like, how wouldn't it be so cool if this actually exists? Like, how could we? Because we always went back to it. But yeah,
even I think the people we showed this to, right, along the way to get feedback, I think one of the comments that we got most often, even from adults, right, was like, well, how do I want to go there.
Yeah.
How do I send my, how do I send my kids there? And I mean, we talked about it. I don't,
So
I think
I would be
it
willing
does
to
need to
invest
happen
in a program that makes this happen.
And I think that was our biggest thing, like talking about next, how would we get people to contribute and invest in our school? Because we didn't talk about, the money aspect of it.
All right. So let's unpack that.
and
Uh-oh, what happened?
I'm showing you something real quick just to start thinking about. This just came across I got an email from Otto Scharmer today that they are putting together an accelerator for systems transformation that wants teams to do prototyping of possibilities of real things. So I'm wondering if you guys would be interested in, as a team, that I would do that.
Oh, to like go out on your sailboat and talk about it? Is that
No,
what
I'm trying to find out where you guys are. I've lost you guys. Hang on a sec. There you are. No, that's interesting.
Victoria,
Today that
Victoria,
came up.
are you with us?
Pardon me?
So is Victoria with us? I just want to make sure that we're all here. Victoria
Yeah.
and Belinda, are you guys both here?
Everyone's here, right? The team's all here?
yeah, I think Victoria and Belinda are
They're
from
in
the
another
other.
group.
They're in another
group.
Mhm.
They were in the first group. I
Okay.
invited everybody in if they want to come in.
All right, so guys, I'm going to introduce you guys to a framework you might already be aware of, but I think it could help. So we call it the task cycle. So you have a task. The task before you is how to make manifest the potential of this image in the reality of Philadelphia school districts and systems, right? So a task cycle, I would suggest a way to think about this that can ground it. So the hardest part of this work is imaging the potential, which you guys have done. Holy shit, again, right? The next hardest part is manifesting it in reality. And one of the ways that we've found helps us guide in a regenerative way how to do this is this thing called the task cycle. And it has 4 aspects to it. What is the purpose of the task? What are the products we're seeking in order for the task to be successful? What's the process we're going to use in order to manifest those products to achieve that purpose? And last, and probably where we are right now, based on what I saw, is what are the functioning capabilities necessary in order to engage that process that will in fact achieve the products, that will in fact manifest the purpose. So the purpose, you guys, all you need to do really, I think, is put into very clear words what the purpose is of this task. The products you guys, what you guys did, the video is the product. That's the product you're seeking. Everything I saw there is the product you're seeking in a transformed educational system. I think the work now is what's the process? And the process literally is outlining where are the key stakeholders in that system you're seeking to transform that actually need to be engaged in a way that they deeply care about to participate. So I think there's 5 sets of stakeholders. And you identified, interestingly, 4 of the 5. The 5th one was implied. So if we take and just draw a star like you learned to do in kindergarten, or maybe 2nd grade, think about the 5 sets of stakeholders in the educational system. So first of all, at the top of the star are the users. These would be everybody who uses the educational system. And for simplicity, I would say the students. Then if we drop down to the lower right-hand point of the star, it is who are the co-creators? This would be all of the teachers, all of the administrators, everybody who's needed to co-create this system you're seeking. If we go up now to the left-hand upper point of the star, this would be the Earth systems, which is the only part of it that you guys didn't address specifically. And this would be everything associated with what commonly is called sustainability. Earth, wind, fire, and water, right? All this stuff without which we don't have an educational system, right? Then if you go horizontally over to the upper right-hand point of the star, it's the community. The community is not abstract. You guys nailed that. The community has to do with the geographical location that you're seeking to transform, and you nailed it by grounding this in the naval yards. Then lastly are the investors. Now the investors is tricky because the investors are not only the people bringing the money to the table, they're the people bringing the energy and effort to the table to go back up to the top of the star and serve the users. So you can now see that these are all 5 deeply interrelated core stakeholders. So the only advice I could offer, and again, I didn't state this early on, I'll state it like I said with the first group, there's only 2 rules to my engagement with you guys, and that is don't accept anything that I'm saying until you ground it in your own experience and see if it has value. But at the same time, please don't reject it until you do the same. Test it, see if it works, right? So I would suggest that given this task cycle, so what I'm doing now is I'm marrying two different frameworks. The task cycle, which is purpose, products, process, preparation. Preparation being functional capabilities. What capabilities do you guys need to develop in order to now engage this process effectively that will in fact produce those products that are in alignment with your purpose? So the only thing that's missing for me in that task cycle right now is a very clear statement of purpose for the task, which is manifesting this vision, manifesting this potential. The product, you guys nailed it. The product is the video. You want that image. You want that to happen. So really the work is through this other potential framework, which I'll call the living system pentad, given that there's 5 elements. And the trick to that is understanding that they're all deeply interrelated. And it means that I may not be, as an entity, a member of only one of those sets of stakeholders. So for example, as a co-creator, I could also be a user. I could also be an investor. I could also be a community member, right? It's just understanding those interrelationships. But the key to that is building, and I'm going to use it in the regenerative world, a fairly technical term, is understanding what are the value-adding processes that must be delivered, non-negotiable, to each of those 5 sets of stakeholders in order to produce those products. In other words, it's not what is the value that needs to be delivered to each of those 5. It is the value-adding processes that will build their capacity to constantly increase their stake in the game over time. You see the difference? It's a critical, ostensibly subtle, but critical difference. What's the capacity you need to build in each of those 5 sets of stakeholders so that they will continually build their capacity to keep their stake in the game? Because all 5 are necessary for this evolution and transformation to occur. Is this making sense to you? So I would suggest, in answer to the question of how do you make this happen, I would suggest exploring that living system pentad as a way of building capacity through a process. And then you just have to ask, what do we need to do as a team? And by the way, I'd be willing to commit any amount of effort to support you guys in this task. This is just, it's brilliant work. And that's really all I have to say.
So that still begs the question of what we're going to do, or what your team will do.
So the question is, what? Look at the task cycle.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
That's what I'm asking the team. You know, as you begin to think about that, I said there is an opportunity that you could interact with people around the world, and we could really develop this, you know, through the you process also.
I don't want to go around the world, John.
No, I'm talking about people who are interested in reimagining.
I think it's got to be grounded in this place.
Yeah, well, it would be.
Right?
Yeah, it would be.
So let's shift. Let's go to Michael, because Michael knows more about the stakeholders than I do. Let's ask him his thoughts about this.
Okay, so it's doable, but and looking at the video, I saw elements of schools that have done a pretty good job of attempting to do what they have created in this video. The issue that I see is, how do you bring that to scale? So you can create little ecosystems where you can have this. And I'll give you a perfect example. In Hunterdon County, it's all the way up on the western side of New Jersey. And it's right up against, if anybody knows where New Hope in Pennsylvania is, Right across from that is Lambertville, and they're very artistic towns, and they're very, you know, they are very accepting communities. A little north of Lambertville is a little town called Stockton. So while I was a superintendent up in that area, Stockton had a school that was a K-6 school, but they only had about 50 kids or less in the school. And in that school, because they had so few kids, they actually created a mini version of what you would put together in your video. So they had students and they weren't assigned by grades. They very much focused on what their interests were, not to the extent of what you created in the video. But that's just one example. So in my mind, when I saw that video, I thought, this can happen. There's no doubt in my mind it can happen. And there are certain charter schools and other schools that have managed to do this in a small version. I think the biggest challenge is trying to take that to scale, because there are so many other forces that just can't accept that kind of a change, that can't let go. And my question to all of you would be, I don't know what your ages are, and I don't know what your backgrounds or anything are, but if you had a child, I mean, in the video, it looks great, but if you had a child doing, you know, in a school and he or she was successful, would you be brave enough to put your child in that school? You're nodding yes, because you've seen the product and you heard all that. But think about some of the families who may look to the school that their child's in and saying, well, this high school my child's going to, they have a high percentage of kids that go on to very prestigious colleges or universities, and they do well. And the track that my child is on right now, going through the standardized process, is one of success. There's a very good chance that he or she's going to get into a Penn or Yale or Harvard and go into finances, medicine. Here, you're taking a gamble and saying, yeah, this can happen. But the question is, would you do that? And then there are a lot of other people that in spending many years trying to bring forth that kind of transformative idea into a public school system, that for them to even think in those terms is almost beyond their capacity. So there are other factors, there are political, economic, all different kinds of factors that would impact you trying to make this successful. The only way that I could see it would be is if you started it almost in a pilot fashion within a smaller capacity, but then bringing it to scale is the real challenge.
So to think about that though, you guys watched obviously that clip I gave you on High Tech High, you know, out in California, which is very interesting because what I tell all of you to watch the full documentary on that called Most Likely to Succeed. And a lot of the issues that Michael just brought up are the issues that when they interview the parents are the same types of things, where those parents were willing, because this was a school within, I think it's where in San Diego, where it was part of the public school system, a charter school. And what I'm wondering about is if are any of you in Philadelphia part of the Philadelphia school system?
Was
You were, that's, yeah. So the question is what's the charter process? You know, that if this group could really begin to pull this together in, you know, utilizing John's framework, and then what High Tech High, how High Tech High started was that one of the major computer companies out there were looking at how do we reimagine schools? And so the question would be, and John, I don't know what your connections still are at the Naval Yard, where we could look at some of those companies there that would be willing to invest in the development of a charter school like this based in the Philadelphia, Naval Yard, based off of your ideas, that you have there, because there are examples around this country of this working. And the top one that's still functioning is High Tech High out in California. The difference that what you're doing is you're looking at a multi-age school system that is which actually would tie into the work community there as you have it. So it becomes a nested partnership in relationship to the learning all the way through life.
So
So-
John, the key here is that it's absolutely place sourced.
Yeah, so it would be. I'm talking about the Naval Yard. Putting it
So the naval yards, one of the keys to me is, does anybody know the status? Last time I checked, there was still a big battle going on about whether they were going to allow residential communities into the naval yards. Has that happened yet?
I don't
I think
think so.
If
I
that
don't think it's
happens,
happened yet.
if
but
that
it's been under
happens, you guys have
discussion.
leverage.
Yeah, that would be
Right?
true.
Because as soon as residential community can be developed, so the problem with the naval yards was the whole contractual process of shifting it from the DOD into the private sector was they would not allow residential functions to be on the naval yard property.
Mhm.
Well, about 2 years ago, that started to shift. My deep connections with the Navy Yard shifted about a year ago, and that was still in process. If that happens, you guys, now we got a game to play.
Yeah,
Because the people who live there will need some sort of educational system. And if you guys can provide, in other words, it's a vacuum, right? So if you guys can somehow connect with the administrators of, I think it's a connection, again, it's the stakeholders, right? So we look at that pentat of stakeholders. I'm looking right at the community here right now. What is the community within the naval yards relative to the investors of the Philadelphia school system? And to see whether or not they're, so the model of what you guys have done, and I hate to use the word model, more the instrument of what you guys are achieving has been successfully achieved dramatically in primarily schools for the term, there's been so many terms used for this, but it's primarily for kids who have special needs, primarily like ADD and dyslexia and executive functioning disorder, those kinds of schools, but they cost like 40 grand a year to send your kid to, right? So what Michael's talking about is the key to making this financially doable has to do with a community that has the energy and will to make that happen, which I think grounding it in the naval yards makes perfect sense, because that whole process, that whole developmental energy there is all about transforming this DOD facility into a vastly sustainable community. And I think the key is, I would love to know whether or not there's residential availability there yet.
we can check that out, and you could too.
Yeah, I could find that out pretty easily. I'm going to make a commitment to you guys that I want to help you. I want you to make this happen.
Yeah, I think we would really love to. I mean, truly, honestly, I mean, it's what education should be, not only for students and parents and their families, but also, as you're talking about, the community. Like, there are so many businesses there. And I was just quickly trying to find the answer to your question. There's an article in the Philly Inquirer from July that I couldn't really truly read while we were talking, but it's talking about even more, smaller business and women-owned businesses coming into that area, and just the importance of all that, and the importance of students being part of that process and feeling part of the community and solving the problems of their community, because it's their future. And then as teachers, I mean, this class and this project has really made me emotional as well as a teacher, quite honestly, because I look at how much, obviously, school is changing right now, but it's not changing enough. And I've become more and more frustrated as I've continued with our awesome project and being disheartened at the school district seeking time and time again to just go back to our normal traditional schedule because everyone else is going back to it, when it's so clearly not what the students and the parents and the teachers need or should want. And it just screams, this isn't right. Like, there is nothing. And even a kid said to me today, she goes, your assignment only took me 20 minutes today. And I said, well, did you work on the concept? Did you achieve understanding and mastery of dividing decimals? So thrilling. And she was like, well, yeah. And I said, so why do you have to spend 45 minutes on it then? She was like, well, I don't know, because that's how long class normally is. And I said, but why do you spend 45 minutes on something you've already mastered in 20 minutes? Like, and that's
video
where
talked about that. The kid who's like, the mom says, look, the kid's doing great, but he's not being challenged enough, right?
Yeah.
But what Michael was saying, and I think that what you guys are trying to do is make this bridge between those highly successful schools in the learning disabled community or learning difference community, depending upon what term you use now, and bridging that into the public school system. And that's not going to be easy. However, I think given the place source condition of the Naval Yards in Philadelphia, you might have a really fecund opportunity, and tie that to the disruption of COVID as a means for engaging the discussion. So the disruption of COVID actually is of value to you, right? Because things have to change in order for this to happen. Well, guess what? Here's a way that we can do it and at the same time address, tying it to that, the means by which we engage when we have a pandemic, or what's going to be the next pandemic or the next big issue, right?
You know, this is what, Michael, you know, I was just thinking about this. This is what the Drexel School should be.
I agree, Michael or John. This is what you guys should be doing.
Yeah, I'm talking about, you know, because Drexel is involved with McMichael's. The first team talked about where their school was doing, and what the Drexel School of Education is going to be putting the school together. And in reality, this is the school that Drexel School of Education should be putting together.
Right.
I was thinking about that when we were doing this project, because, well, for me, I did my undergraduate at Drexel. So this idea of like work experience and civic engagement being integrated into the curriculum, and that to me is the way it should be at all levels. Like when I got to Drexel and had that experience, I'm like, why wasn't I not exposed to this in high school or even beyond? Like nobody talked to me in grade school about what I wanted to do with, you know, my life, right? So when I got to Drexel, I was like, oh, this is how it should be. Like, this is how I'm supposed to figure that out in like this real tangible way. And so like when we were talking about it, like I know I brought that part of that experience of my education to this, with that integration with the community. And I did wonder, like, is Drexel thinking about, in the school that they're developing, taking that model and bringing the Drexel model on the university level to, you know, elementary and secondary? Because to me, it just makes so much sense. And I feel like, I mean, there are kinks in the process, as there are in all processes, but like when I see at that level, like that, I didn't even have exposure to anybody like talking to me about goals or professional development till I got to college. I'm like, I think I would have approached so many things in a different way if somebody had did that with me when I was in, you know, sixth grade.
I'm going to share.
Let's take that the next step. So Lauren, Sarah, Carrie, Jamil, and Kendall. How many of you are committed to actually making this happen? Would you be willing to do the work necessary to make this happen? All right.
100%.
All right. So I'm there with you. I think one of the ways to begin to address what the restraint that Michael's bringing to the table, right? So what you guys have done is you've created a really powerful activating force. Michael's representing to you what are the restraints. Your job is to reconcile those.
Let,
That's
let
your
me,
job.
let me add something too, John.
Yeah.
There are models of this that exist within 50 miles of all of us. Okay, so I don't know where everyone lives. I don't know if you're in the regional area. There's a high-tech high in Monmouth County, New Jersey, that when I was a superintendent in Monroe and Middlesex, I took my entire leadership team to visit because it's part of the Monmouth school district, but it's more of like an academy school with only a few hundred students. They have to get in and all that kind of stuff, and it's right next to a community college. So the kids go for lunch. They go over to the college campus. They walk around. The models there, so you can actually. Well, we went and visited. That's one. The other one is the Science Leadership Academy right in Philadelphia. The person who runs that, at least who did when I visited probably 5 years ago or more, is brilliant at doing this. He has set that model up. We walked through the high school. Kids had earbuds. They were in and out. They would stay at night till 10 o'clock at night working on projects that they wanted to work on. So it's already there. And that's part of the Philadelphia School District. The guy who runs it, he is a little bit of a revolutionary. When we were meeting with him and he said, oh, the district wanted me to do this, he kind of did what he wanted to do. He had the leverage because he was so successful to successfully push back and not allow those other things to infringe into that school. And the other one is the STEM Academy as part of Downingtown's school district, which is top in the state of. So the STEM Academy is top in Pennsylvania. The high-tech high in New Jersey is the top high school in New Jersey. Thomas Jefferson down in Virginia is up there in the top, usually the top one or two in the country as well. So these are examples that I just gave you that are within public high schools. So it can be a charter school, or if you can tap into the resources that a public school district offers, now you're tapping into existing resources. You can still, just like all those schools, the kids all do apprenticeships and internships and all those kind of things. And I was huge with doing that, with getting kids to go out into medical practices as high school students. And that was part of their capstone, and they did it over the summer, and we arranged all that. They all do those type of things. You tap into the resources that are already there. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to start from scratch. If you can start from scratch and you can get investors, tremendous.
Because this is different though. And the
It
reason
is a
I'm
little,
yeah,
but
well,
it's not.
what?
It's both, right? So I
Yeah,
have two questions.
it's different though. This is not a high school.
It's not.
Well, no, it's not.
But what Michael's saying is that there are, I don't want to call them models, because what we don't want to do is recreate what's already been done. But what we want to do is learn from what's already been done in order to inform the process you guys need to engage. So I have two questions. First is, what are you guys all doing next semester? John, is there a course you could create that would take these guys and allow them to do this work as a way to contribute to their degree and all whatever the hell they have to do to, like,
That, yeah, I'm thinking about that because they have to take, what courses are you taking? You're taking your research next quarter, right?
Research
801.
to,
You're taking 810?
810 and 888.
Yeah, okay. So they're gonna do that. We can do
well, we're in
this off
different,
on the side, okay? Yeah, we can, if you're willing to do
take this
something on the
offline, but the
side.
question is,
I
can
can't
these
get-
guys actually create a course where they are doing this work in reality as also contributing to their degree credits for Drexel?
If my redesign of the EDD was in place right now, yes, they could, but it ain't in place right now. So
Make it happen, brother.
I'm trying, honestly, I'm trying to, but
John, what about the O3L?
yeah, I was thinking about that, but I'm a little bit concerned about that. What if you guys, if we can work on the side for the time being, because one of the things I want to show this to Penny, that's our dean. and I want to talk to her about it. And I just want to see her reaction to it, because there are many avenues. That's why I asked the question about charter school. That's why I asked about the place, John, of having it down there. And the other thing that makes this different, and even High Tech High, it's a high school, and I know about, you know, the one Chris runs, you know, in Philadelphia, et cetera. But what is so unique about this, it's a continuation of, you know, learning through life. That to me is
So
what
here,
makes this
here's
unique.
here's another pathway, possible pathway. You and I, John, have talked about dissertation in practice.
Right.
Every one of these people, I shouldn't say, all of you
All
have to,
these
you're going to
people.
be, you're going to be working on a dissertation. If they identified a research project, their dissertation as this.
Yeah,
Yes.
can you do a collaborative dissertation? Is that possible?
I have been pushing for team dissertations, and this could be the first one.
You know, Penny will be right on board with that.
Well, but it's the university. So I mean,
I think we need to discuss this offline.
Yeah, we will discuss this offline,
But
but
I also have resources that could bring money to the table for the physical infrastructure to make it happen.
good. Okay.
So that has nothing to do with the administrative stuff. It has to do with bricks and mortar to make it happen.
John, both Johns.
Yeah.
Think about this. I work as an educational consultant, and I'm contacted by people that are in private equity, and I get emails 4 times, 5 times a week to offer advice on should they invest in this software company or this company or that company. And I give them an hour of time and do this. There are private equity companies.
Yeah.
If they thought that they could, the private equities, they want to know that they can make money on it. But if
it's a private school.
Well,
yeah,
you can take contributions, but okay, it's a charter school, it's a private school, but they would have to think that they would be like, they're willing to invest money even over a period of time, but their return on investment has to happen, right? But all I'm saying is there are people out there that would be willing to invest in that.
Bill Gates is out there too.
But I'm much more interested in this being a public school project.
Yes, so am I.
Because this is like the first time that it moves out of that, you know, pay to play kind of scenario, which the affluent can afford, into a public school system that everybody deserves, right? And the private equity company that I'm talking about is a new investment called I3, which John, you and I have talked about this. So bricks and mortar, I think we can make happen, but that's the easy part, right? The hard part is generating within a public school system the will to do this, which is the last question that I have for you. And it is, I think that maybe a way to think about it, I'm just remembering rule number 1 and rule number 2, right?
You didn't tell them that, John. You didn't tell that this group.
He did.
I did.
Oh, he did. Okay.
I did. I try to be pretty careful about that. An invitation to you is to think really hard about what was the shift and how did it occur in your thinking that produced this work that you can use as a process to engage others to do the same. So how did it happen for you? And I would really spend a lot of time, I would invite you really to focus on what was it that really helped you shift your thinking to produce this work that you could then transfer, but not exactly because you're an individual, but what are the principles that you could use to engage others who may be the restraining forces to reconcile with what you're trying to activate through examining the process you went through. Thinking there might be some value there.
And the other question I want to pose to you, because we have some of your colleagues from Team One in here too, is would you invite other classmates, colleagues to become part of this if they so desire? I'm asking this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the thinking around it when we were talking is that obviously, like we talked in one of our meetings about like all the staff that you would need to make something like this happen, right? So like we envision like there are people that are maybe not full-time faculty, but come in for project-based learning. And then you have business development and career development and fundraising. And like, it would take many people.
Yeah, because
I think one
Victoria,
reason we were so,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say so successful is we do all bring such different perspectives and experiences and backgrounds and passions. And I think it was all of those meetings. So I do think the, you know, the more of that we can get in only strengthens it.
Yeah, because Victoria, you're there, and also Belinda, you're there. And so you've heard this and probably saw this. So it'd be interesting, you know, to see if other people in this cohort, in this class, would be willing to participate in the, you know, continuation of this. The more the merrier.
So I want to be a little more specific about the question I asked. So I would love to hear, before we have to say arrivederci for tonight, describe for me how the energy in you shifted by engaging this project for each of you individually.
I mean, for me, just to share, like my background, I think is different quite a bit from Jamil and Kendall and Sarah, in that I am I'm in administration. I work in alumni engagement, so I'm in that externally facing role, but with people that have come to the end of their college experience. And like I said a little bit ago, I just thought to myself, like, what is the kind of education that I would have wanted before I got to college? And like, what did I feel like I was missing when I got to a place like Drexel, where you were kind of thrown in and you had to know what you wanted to do, because right away you were applying for co-op and going into the real world, you know? And so for me, it was like thinking back and saying, like, what did I feel like I was missing, you know? And I look at my children now. I have a second grader and a preschooler that have been, you know, hybrid virtual learning, out of school since March. And I thought, what is the kind of experience that I want them to have? And then the other piece of it for me, with the whole pivot to being remote and virtual life and work, has been, from the work perspective for me, and even from the school perspective for my kids, thinking about the fact that when we go back to the normal, whatever that is, like, I sort of see it as, I want to find a way to integrate my work and life around things that matter to me, you know, and things that I'm passionate about and things that I'm interested in, and not thinking about, like, I work 40 hours a week and I fit in whatever I can outside of that in between, you know, like, I don't want to go back to living in that way of like fitting in real life around.
So Lauren, as you begin to engage the other stakeholders who will be necessary to be engaged in this process, how can you work with them in a way that gets to that same place for them, what they actually authentically frickin' care about? That was really valuable. You see it? Like, look what it did for you. Imagine you're giving them a gift by helping them reconnect with what they actually care about.
So that was mine. I mean, others probably have many different things to share.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm special education. So I work with students with more severe disabilities. And with the shift of COVID, I've realized how much my students need in-person learning. However, that doesn't mean, you know, the brick and mortar addition, subtraction. They need the life skills setting and learning skills that will help them be productive members of society eventually. And I just think that, you know, when we were talking about the school, we were talking about general ed students, and then we started talking about special education students. And I think that, you know, they would fit right in. And, you know, I feel like I used to work in Philadelphia also, and their special education population is very high. And I think that, you know, that would draw a lot of, you know, I'm not saying students with severe disabilities, all of them need to go here, but I think that it's opening up to everybody. So it really opened my eyes in that way.
Wow. That's pretty powerful, Sarah.
I'll go ahead and jump in for myself. I'm a middle school math teacher. And for me, the shift, I kind of spoke about it a little bit ago, is that my belief in teaching has always been that a child should enjoy school, whatever school may mean. Like, they should enjoy the learning process. And I've only been a teacher for 10 years now, but my goal every year is, you know, yes, I have to worry about the standards because that is, you know, part of my contractual obligation right now. But truly, as a teacher, the only thing I strive to do every year is make kids love to learn. And the greatest joy I get is when kids finish the year and say, you know what, Miss Yarsh, I used to hate math class. And it maybe still isn't my favorite, but I like it better because you helped me love to learn and like the process of how to problem solve, how to get through things, how to enjoy the experience of it. And just the ability for students to think for themselves, to persevere.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
And
Frozen.
It was so good.
She's frozen with a great expression.
Expression's great.
Carrie's favorite thing. So I'll jump in, I guess. For me, it's always been an inner conflict in the educational system here because I grew up in Jamaica, and it's way different. So in Jamaica, we always are striving towards something, right? And it wasn't college, right? But for us, we had to choose pretty early on where we wanted to go in terms of a career, right? And so for us, we were thinking, we were working every day in school to become lawyers or doctors or architects or whatever. And so every course that we were taking was something we chose. We were interested in becoming an architect, so we were doing this kind of classes. And coming here, it's different, right? It's, you got to take these tests to get into college. And so for me, even being in the classroom as a math teacher, it's always like, I'm trying to show them why and how math connects to what they're doing, but it's sort of like being hypocritical, right? Because their whole game is to pass this SAT or this AP course to get into college. You know, and so as we worked on this, it kind of felt like a connection, right? Where they're working towards what they need to work on to succeed in life, but they also knew that whenever I'm done here, if I don't feel like going to college, I've prepared with these companies who I've been working with for 4 or 5 years, and now I can go do that instead.
So Jamil, it's funny, watching the video, your role in the video is really cool. You came across as kind of like this seasoned professor who understands all of this, and you're like the documentarian of this is how this works. Like, is there any other way? It was really fun to watch.
Thank you. I tried. They gave me the president role, so.
So I think I'll go. You know, for me, I think this is also very personal. And I look back to I went to middle school overseas, and it was a very different experience. And when I came back to the States for high school, it was just a awful experience. And I actually ended up dropping out of high school because it just wasn't working for me. Didn't fit in. I was getting in trouble probably more than I, should have, because, and always this desire to like push and question. And that wasn't okay. And so I think the other part of it is I'm an artist. And so in the arts, I have that ability to like truly be myself and communicate and express things that are like deeply personal and deeply important. And so I think all of that kind of funneled into my vision. And kind of like Lauren talked about, I have 2 kids. One just started high school, one is in 8th grade. And when I look at what they have experienced and what they're experiencing right now, it's it's such a balance as a parent between like, they're getting frustrated over things. And I'm like, it doesn't matter, just don't do it. But then I also feel like I can't say that, with them, but trying to find, and I have one who, my son, I think is more, he knows what his passion is and is very driven by that. And we learn and have such deep and important conversations, and that doesn't happen in school. And with my daughter, I think she was a little bit later and is still finding her path. And that's fine. That can take forever as long as I'm, concerned. And I think it's always changing, but just how very different they are, and how yet myself and them, we all were kind of forced into the same system. I think the other piece of it for me that I had shared is I had started a charter school in New Jersey, very similar to this. That's actually just in its 2nd year right now. I'm not with the school any longer, but for me, we had all of these great ideas, but then when it came to practice, I think the school wasn't prepared enough, and it ended up just like fitting into the system instead of staying true to itself. And I'm still hopeful that it will get there. I think it also had zero leadership in the first year. There was, I think, like 4 principals within the first year, which made it hard. So I believe that this is possible, and I know it, but I think the challenge is fighting against that system. And I think it's, we talked a lot about that this does need to be a public school, because it should be accessible, because everybody deserves this. But then thinking about how to make that happen. Now, I think in some ways when we were talking about this, it was pure imagination, right? In some aspects, because it was like, well, we don't have to worry about the state standards because we don't. But now thinking, but we're now up against that reality. So I was really intrigued by, you said the one school in Philly who was just like, nope, doing it my way anyway. And I'm like, that's, that to me is inspirational.
Terry, that was just lovely. And the only thing I would push back on is I don't think we need to fight against the system. I think what we need to do is re-image that the restraints that they're bringing to the table have value, because they're caring about something. And it's likely you're caring about the same thing. So as an example, think about Gothic cathedrals. I'm an architect, so that's where I go, right? So when we were building Gothic cathedrals, if we wanted to build these as a species, these huge soaring spaces to like express our glory to God, right? But all we had to build out of at the time, because steel hadn't been invented yet, was stone. And it was really heavy. And it was not really conducive to building tall spaces, because if you build a really tall wall out of stone, it tends to want to fall over, right? So gravity was the restraint. Well, interestingly, that ended up creating flying buttresses that actually used gravity as the weight of pushing those walls apart as the roof was pushing down on those stone walls. They wanted to do this. So we'll use gravity to create these stone buttresses using their weight to hold these walls. So it's a way of understanding those restraining forces as having value. Because I think as soon as we can begin to shift that way, it's why I'm asking the question I'm asking. Because if you now can image engaging the folks who are going to bring restraints to the table through the lens of how it is that you found this valuable, but doing it in a way that we call resourcing. And I'll define resourcing as helping folks reconnect with their source, which is exactly what I saw in that video, your educational system and the leadership collaboratory is trying to accomplish. So if you use the principles of what you use to create this in engaging the others who are going to bring restraints to the table, you're going to be fine.
And speaking of restraints, it's almost 9:15.
Oh, holy smokes. We've been on it for a while, haven't we?
Yeah, we have been, which is good. But what I'm going to say is, I think we have the sort of a game plan to move forward, because it sounds like you guys are committed to this. John sounds like he's committed and should be committed.
Oh, that goes without saying, brother.
Yeah, I know that. And then Michael, obviously, you'll get involved in this. And I am going to talk to the dean about this too, because I'm finding this interesting, from the point of view, I'm curious to see how she'll respond to this. Also, I think this idea of, I'm going to talk to Deanna about this, about maybe having if you guys, depends on you guys wanting to do this, if we can do sort of the group dissertation, or at least a framework of that around the components of, the framework that you guys are putting together. So that's another possibility.
So would you guys be interested in that?
Yeah.
No, I'm not asking you, John.
No, I'm saying, that's what I'm saying to them, if they're
Yeah.
interested in it.
I mean, the only thing I would say is I know some of us are in the 5-year plan, and some are in the 3-year. So I don't know how that affects working together, but
Well, we'll figure it out.
the slow path here.
Another restraint that needs.
That's what I was going to say.
No, I already wrote 2 chapters in my dissertation.
Yeah, well,
I'll chalk it up to the loss for this, though.
well, you can change. I've seen those things change at the last second. So I think we have a lot here. Obviously, we can listen to this again because I'm recording this, as this. And within a week or so, we'll get back. And John and I and John and Michael we'll talk next week about this a little bit. I'll be down there, John.
I have a request. Is there a way that there's a link or a way I can download that video?
Yeah, we want that. You guys are.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up now for
Yeah,
the,
good. And I got
I'll put it in the
recorded,
chat.
too, John. I have it recorded on here.
Well, but I just want the video. I don't want all our chat about it.
No.
It's on-
I have the video recorded separately.
Okay, so I need to ask you guys who are on the team, do I have your permission to show this to other folks?
Yeah, good with me.
Yes.
Good.
Good with me.
Okay.
Kendall, do you have the link handy?
Yeah, I do.
Email
sign
to
into
me
my
and I'll get
Google
it
to
John and
pull
to
it up.
Michael.
Okay,
Yeah, just email it to me and I'll get it to them.
Will do.
okay.
All right.
Right.
It'll be
All
tougher
right,
to
everybody.
email the link, John, than to put it in a shared doc because it's going to be huge. So trying to email that would be tough. If it's put into a Teams or a Google shared folder.
It's
No,
it's
a
on
link.
YouTube.
It's on
YouTube.
YouTube.
Oh, it's on YouTube.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's on YouTube.